Lucas pulled his car to a stop, right across from Rosy's diner, a spot he used to know like the back of his hand. The neon sign over the door shone in streaks of green and yellow, a glowing signal to anyone who remembered the place from years ago. To Lucas, those colors called up memories of simpler days when he would walk in proudly, knowing every regular by name. But now, years later, and after so much time away, a strange doubt thudded in his chest with every heartbeat. Was Rosy still the place of welcoming laughter and honest work, or had all those good things faded without someone around to keep watch? Lucas took a steady breath. Reminders of old stories and lessons from his mum circling through his thoughts. He wondered if those values, the kind that built Rosy's in the first place, had been chipped away by neglect and change while he was gone. Trying not to attract too much attention, Lucas slipped into faded jeans and a worn jacket before heading inside. He wanted to blend in, to see the place from a fresh angle, so he joined the crowd lining up for lunch. The familiar scent of frying onions and brewed coffee hit him hard, but instead of feeling comforted, he sensed a chill in the air. Something about the chatter seemed forced, the smiles from the servers felt tired, and the walls, once filled with warmth, now looked a little empty. He moved quietly, observing the small details, a chipped mug here, a faded photo there, searching for any real trace of the Rosy's diner he remembered so well. The line inched forward at its own lazy pace, and Lucas started to notice the little things that felt off. No one behind the counter looked up or offered a friendly hello, just a few quick glances at the next order and nothing more. It was like he and everyone else waiting were invisible, barely more than a line of ticket numbers in a noisy deli, rather than guests at a place that once felt like home. The sound of a cell phone screen being tapped carried across the room, and a sharp snap of gum seemed to drown out any cheerful greetings that might have happened in better days. There was a strange wall between the people working and those passing through the door, an invisible line that no one bothered to cross. By the time Lucas reached the counter, Megan was working the register. She barely glanced in his direction, her focus somewhere far away. Next to her was Josh, lost in his own thoughts, not even pretending to listen. Lucas gave his order, and Megan punched it into the system with the same routine air he'd seen 100 times from strangers in chain restaurants. There was no real eye contact or even a hint of warmth. The whole exchange left Lucas feeling hollow, a deep, unsettling emptiness in his chest. The Rosy's diner, he remembered, had always been about belonging, about people truly seeing one another, and right now that spirit felt farther away than ever. As Lucas waited for his order, his attention drifted to the counter where he heard hushed voices, just loud enough to catch some of the words. Under Josh, still half leaning against the register, made a snide comment about folks coming in from the wrong side of town. Megan let out a quick laugh, raising her eyebrows at another worker, and shook her head about the group who had started working through the new shelter program. Their words carried a sharp edge, so different from what Lucas remembered Rosy's diner to be. There was no attempt to whisper kindly. It was the kind of mocking that made the air heavy, that seemed to put up fences rather than invite people in. Lucas felt the sting of it, not just as disappointment, but as something colder settling underneath his skin. He realized it wasn't only a lack of manners, but a real shift in attitude. The diner had once been a spot where people of every background came together, a place where no one pointed fingers or measured another's worth. Now it felt like there was a hard shell of judgment encasing everything, turning Rosy's from a safe haven into another place where people sized each other up and kept their distance. It struck Lucas how easily hope could be squeezed out of a place if people stopped caring, and he wondered if it was too late to change things back. The conversation at the counter took on a different tone as Megan, while gathering orders, suddenly brought up the owner of Rosy's diner. She called him a ghost, saying you would sooner spot Bigfoot wandering down Main Street than ever see the guy who was supposed to run things. Josh nodded and chimed in. He's just a faded photograph by the door, right? No one even knows if he still cares. They seemed almost amused by the thought, as if it was an old joke between them, but beneath the surface, the feeling in the diner grew even heavier. It wasn't just that the workers felt disconnected from whoever was in charge. Everyone, customers included, could sense that something vital was missing. Lucas, listening from his seat, felt his anger spike, but it was the raw disappointment that left him sitting there, not knowing what to do next. It struck him that his long absence had let things drift in ways he never imagined. Once people had looked up to Rosy's for more than just food, they found a sense of pride and togetherness. Now, all that remained was a faded memory and a handful of people just going through the motions. The quiet between scattered customers and the slouching workers was more than awkwardness. It was a sign that Rosy's had lost its very reason for being. Lucas felt the weight of it. When no one leads with heart, everything starts to fall apart. Without saying a word, Lucas leaned back from the counter and quietly asked Megan to cancel his order. He could feel her confusion, but he did not offer any explanation. As he walked out, the bell on the door rang out in an almost lonely way, marking his exit. It was more than just a sandwich he was leaving behind. For Lucas, it felt like a piece of his own history was being left on that linoleum floor. He pushed out into the afternoon, slid into his car, and closed the door. For a few minutes, he just stared at the familiar steering wheel, his hands motionless and heavy. He tried to trace back the moment when everything started to drift off course, when Rosy's diner lost its spark and when he, as the owner, stopped paying attention to what truly mattered. Blame weighed on him like a thick coat. He realized now that his lack of presence had given room for indifference to take root. That old sense of duty, the one he used to feel so strongly, slowly returned. Instead of driving away, Lucas just sat there watching the comings and goings at Rosy's from across the street. He studied every detail, the way customers hesitated at the door, how the staff avoided each other's eyes, the dull way people handled their work. Every small gesture told him more about what Rosy's had turned into during the time he had let it slip through his fingers. As evening crept in, Lucas found himself wandering around the back of Rosy's diner, trying to keep out of sight. He didn't want anyone to spot him just yet. Instead, he was hoping to catch an honest slice of what people really thought when they felt unobserved. The alley was familiar in its own quiet way. The same old crates piled against the wall, the faint hum from the freezer. Through an open window by the kitchen, Lucas caught snatches of a conversation mixed with laughter and the clatter of pans. Inside, Marcus, the grill master who had been with the diner for as long as Lucas could remember, was saying something about how Rosy's used to be the heart of the block. He sounded almost defensive, trying to remind everyone that this place had been more than just a job or a paycheck, but his words were met with sharp, mocking replies from Josh and Megan, who laughed off his talk of community with dry comments about having to move with the times. They saw Marcus's pride as outdated and out of touch, letting cynicism set the tone. Lucas listened, his chest tight. He felt a swell of respect for Marcus, who still carried the old purpose, even if it seemed like an uphill battle. At the same time, a bitter guilt gnawed at him. By stepping away for so long, he'd made it easy for voices like Josh and Megan's to drown out the hope and values the diner was built on. That split between stubborn belief and quiet resignation was now clearer than ever. Marcus's words kept circling in Lucas's head as he left the alley, the reminder clear: respect had to go both ways, and just because something was built on good intentions did not mean it would stay that way. Lucas thought of his dad's old advice about gardens, that you could plant the prettiest flowers, but if you forgot to water them, all you would have left was dry dirt and lost chances. Rosy's Diner was supposed to be one of those special places where anyone could feel welcome, a spot built from sweat and hope. Now, standing in the evening shadows, it hit Lucas how badly he had let things slide. The diner felt less like a home and more like a forgotten field. Not wanting to wait any longer, Lucas sent out a text to everyone at Rosy's. He did not offer any details, just a short message about a meeting. First thing the next morning, no room for argument or delay. That night, instead of heading back to his empty apartment, he checked into a run-down motel a few blocks away. He sat at the little desk, his notepad open, writing down everything he noticed, every careless word he had overheard, and every feeling that day had brought up. Lucas knew he would have to face the staff honestly and finally own up to his long silence. This time, he wanted to be there, fully present, ready to try and bring the diner back to life. Morning broke quietly as Lucas made his way back to Rosy's Diner. He walked through the front door without trying to hide behind sunglasses or a cap, just himself, ready for what was coming. He stood off to the side, watching as the rest of the staff trickled in one by one. Marcus arrived before anyone else, his shirt already tucked in, old habits of punctuality and care showing plainly. Lucas nodded at him, feeling a small spark of gratitude. Not long after, Megan came through the door, her usual quick humor missing, eyes darting away when she noticed Lucas standing there. Josh soon followed, shuffling in with his backpack slung low, clearly feeling the weight of the mood in the room. A few more came in, some yawning, some distracted, barely glancing up. It was obvious who still took pride in being there and who saw Rosy's as nothing more than a job. When everyone had arrived, Lucas called them together in the cramped dining area. He did not rush to fill the silence. Instead, he let it stretch, hoping it would sink in and give everyone space to really look around and notice how things felt. The tension was thick, but Lucas knew that any real change had to start with truth, not with scolding or orders. If he wanted to earn back their respect, he would have to be as honest and open as possible from here on out. Lucas took a deep breath and began to speak, skipping any formal greetings. He started by sharing how Rosy's diner first came to be, going back to the days when his grandmother, Mary, opened the doors and built the place out of nothing. Mary was no celebrity, but around this neighborhood, she was known for lending a hand or offering a hot meal to someone down on their luck. Lucas reminded everyone of her favorite saying that no one was just a face in the crowd and every person deserved a second chance. Rosy's was supposed to be more than a restaurant. It was a place people counted on, a place that noticed you even if the rest of the world did not. He did not turn this into a lecture. Instead, he invited them all to remember what brought them here and what kind of space they wanted Rosy's to be. Quietly, Lucas admitted that he had been there the day before, listening from the shadows, and confessed he had lost touch with the heart of the diner. Still, he said, that did not excuse disrespect or treating the place as if it meant nothing. The air went thick with silence. Some looked down, embarrassed, while others met his eyes, waiting to see what would come next. Lucas kept his tone calm, not needing to shout to get his point across. He explained that things would be changing from now on. There would be regular meetings, not just for updates, but for real conversations about what was working and what was not. He promised his own presence in the diner every day, not just watching from the sidelines, but pitching in where needed. They would also start asking customers for honest feedback and really listen to what people in the neighborhood had to say about Rosy's diner. He did not just set out rules. Lucas also made it clear that there would be fresh chances for growth, whether it was extra training or a shot at more responsibility for anyone who wanted to step up. Still, he said commitment was not optional. If someone felt this place was no longer right for them or could not respect what Rosy stood for, that was fine. They were free to leave, no hard feelings. As he finished, the room felt different. A few staff looked quietly relieved, almost like a weight had finally been lifted. Some hesitated, clearly unsure whether they wanted to stay on these new terms. Underneath it all, though, everyone seemed to recognize that something important had shifted. Lucas knew he could not force them all to believe in Rosy's again, but he could set the tone so only those who truly cared would choose to stay. Once the meeting wrapped up and the rest of the staff started drifting back to their routines, Lucas motioned for Megan and Josh to follow him. He led them down a narrow hallway near the storage closet, just far enough from the main dining area so no one else would hear. With honest eyes, Lucas told them straight out that he wanted the truth. What did Rosy's diner mean to them, and did they really want to be here? Josh was the first to speak, shrugging and looking at the floor. He admitted that, for him, this job was just a paycheck. Bills needed to be paid, school loans were piling up, and he had never felt any deep tie to the place itself. Megan jumped in, her frustration clear as she told Lucas she felt let down by his long absence. She missed having a boss who offered guidance or noticed when things went off track. Lucas listened, nodding without getting defensive. He owned up to his mistakes, saying he should have stayed closer to what was going on, but reminded them that their attitudes had power too. He was not about to fire either of them that day, but he made it clear that only those willing to invest in Rosy's diner and treat it and the folks inside with respect would find a future there. The choice to stay or walk away was now theirs, and Lucas meant every word. The atmosphere at Rosy's diner started to change. Though it was not something you could measure in one quick look, staff seemed a little more careful with their words, eyeing Lucas as he made his rounds from table to kitchen, never hovering but always close enough to lend a hand or listen. He did not step in to fix every small problem, instead giving people room to sort things out themselves. Still, everyone knew now that their choices mattered, that what they did and how they spoke about Rosy's could not slide by unnoticed anymore. When the lunch rush hit, Megan tried harder than usual, flashing real smiles and chatting briefly with regulars who came in for sandwiches and coffee. Josh stayed mostly to himself, keeping his focus on the grill, but even he was more measured, no sighs or grumbles, just steady work. Marcus led by example, wiping down counters and sharing a little joke here and there, showing the others that taking pride in small things mattered. Every so often, someone would go out of their way to help a co-worker or toss a kind word across the counter. Lucas watched these moments, small but steady. It was not perfect, not cheerful yet, but he could feel a useful tension in the place, like everyone was waiting to see if this new way would really stick. Change was there, but Lucas understood it would take patience and some tough decisions to make it last. Right in the thick of the lunchtime crowd, as the plates clattered and the phone rang every few minutes, a young guy named Tyler slipped quietly into the diner. He had just started that week, coming in through a shelter program that helped people get back on their feet and find steady work. Tyler hung by the doorway, hands jammed into the pockets of his borrowed uniform, eyes never quite meeting anybody's. Megan, running the register, was the first to notice him, but instead of her earlier friendliness, her tone was curt. She handed him a notepad for taking orders with barely a glance and pointed toward the tables, offering no real welcome. At the grill, Josh kept his back turned, not acknowledging Tyler at all, pretending to be too busy even to nod. Marcus, though, saw what was happening. He caught Tyler's eye and gave him a reassuring smile, gently showing him the ropes without making a big deal out of it. He walked with him to a table, quietly guiding him through the first steps, making sure he did not feel adrift. Watching all of this, Lucas felt an ache and a sense of hope at the same time. It was clear that real change would depend on how Rosy's diner treated people like Tyler, the ones who needed compassion most. He realized the heart of the place was hidden in these small, simple choices, and real transformation would have to start right there. When the last customers had left and the chairs were flipped up on the tables, things around Rosy's diner were quiet except for the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Josh, still wearing his apron, found Lucas wiping down the counter. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, then admitted that he had been out of line earlier that day and in the past. He said he had let his problems spill over into his work and sometimes took his frustration out on the wrong people, including the new kid Tyler. It was not a grand moment or a speech, just a simple, honest apology, his voice low but steady. Lucas looked up and nodded. He did not make a big fuss, but he told Josh that second chances were what Rosy's was all about. As long as people were honest about their mistakes and tried to make them right. They stood there for a few heartbeats in a comfortable silence. Then Josh nodded and headed toward the back to finish his closing chores. The diner was far from perfect, and Lucas knew it. But lately, it felt like a few cracks had started to let in a bit of light. For the first time in years, he sensed that rebuilding was possible, but only if everyone made a real effort to begin again together. The following morning, while it's was still dark outside and the city was quiet. Lucas walked into Rosy's diner alone. He flipped on the lights and moved slowly through the empty kitchen, stopping beside the old bulletin board where a faded photo of Rosy herself still hung. Lucas traced the edge of the frame with his finger and let out a soft sigh. Quietly, he admitted aloud that he had almost let everything slip away: Rosy's dream, the community they had built, and the small family feeling that once made this place special. For a moment, he was just talking to her picture, sharing the weight that words could not always capture. Soon the scent of fresh coffee drifted through the kitchen as the first loaves of bread warmed in the oven, filling the diner with a familiar comfort. One by one, the rest of the crew filed in. This time, it was not tense or awkward like the morning before. Instead, they gathered naturally by the counter, all a little more awake and open. Before breakfast started, Lucas brought everyone together for a quick chat. He thanked them honestly for how they had handled things the previous day and reminded them that real change only works when each person chooses it for themselves. The mood felt lighter, just enough to hint that maybe with shared effort, the best days for Rosy's could still be ahead. Lucas stood with his hands tucked into the pockets of his apron, looking at each person gathered around the counter. His voice was steady as he explained the new way forward for Rosy's diner. He told them there were two options, clear and fair. If someone truly wanted to stay and stand behind what Rosy's was built on, all they needed to do was sign a commitment, nothing formal or cold, just a promise to themselves and to the team that they were invested in the diner's purpose. For those who felt their hearts just were not in it anymore, there would be no hard feelings. Lucas promised help with finding other jobs and offered to write recommendation letters, wanting everyone to feel respected no matter their choice. Stressed that there was no rush. Each person had until the end of that day to decide what felt right. He said it again to make sure nobody missed the point. There would be no judging, and no one would be forced to stay. Lucas wanted real honesty because he knew Rosy's would only start to grow again if the people inside believed in what the place stood for. No one needed to stay out of habit or necessity. The true heart of Rosy's had to come from within. As the day moved along, the promise forms began to trickle into Lucas's hands. Marcus was the first to step up, signing his name without any hesitation. He handed Lucas the sheet with a nod, making it clear that Rosy's diner meant more to him than just a place to clock in and out. Soon after, others followed Marcus's lead. Tyler, still a little shy but clearly hopeful, added his name, and Josh, after a quiet lunch break, deep in thought, finally set his pen to paper as well. Each signature felt like another brick laid in, rebuilding what Rosy's could be, a real team, all in it together. Not everyone stayed, though. After her afternoon shift, Megan met with Lucas and explained that her heart had never quite been in Rosy's. She appreciated the opportunity, but knew she was looking for something different. The goodbye was gentle and respectful, with Lucas offering her one of those strong recommendation letters he had promised. There were no harsh words or heavy feelings, just a real understanding between them. As each person made their choice, the atmosphere shifted. The team that remained felt lighter, more sure of themselves. Lucas felt grateful for the honesty in the air, knowing that with every form returned, the future of Rosy's diner became a little more real. By the time the last dishes were stacked and the sun was setting behind the city skyline, Josh approached the counter with his commitment form in hand. He looked Lucas straight in the eye and said he wanted to stay, promising to put in the work it would take to really earn the trust that had been offered to him. There was no grand speech, just the quiet determination in his voice and the hopeful, almost awkward smile that crept onto his face as he slid the paper across the counter. Lucas accepted the form with a nod but didn't sugarcoat it. He told Josh that trust was something built slow, one day at a time, and it would take real effort to prove that his words were backed up by action. Still, there was a warmth in Lucas's tone, a sign that he believed people could truly change given the chance and the right reason. Rosy's diner was far from perfect or fixed. Some problems would take time, and not every day would be easy, but there was real hope in the way the team came together again. Lucas felt, for the first time in a long while, like they had finally found the right path to bring Rosy's spirit back to life. 1 week later, it was easy to see that Rosy's diner was changing for the better. You could feel the difference. As soon as you walked in, the greetings from Marcus and Tyler felt warmer, and folks working the breakfast rush even managed to slip in a few easy jokes and friendly ribbing. The mood was lighter somehow, and people seemed genuinely happy to be there. Long-time regulars who remembered how things used to be stopped by more often, and a few new faces wandered in after hearing good things from their neighbors. Word of mouth started to work its way through the city, and there was a buzz about how Rosy's was back on track. Lucas stayed mostly in the background, watching it all unfold with a quiet pride. He felt like he fit there again, maybe more than ever before. One morning, Mia, who had been learning some of the old recipes, brought out a dish that tasted just like something Rosy herself would have made. The memories it brought back, both for Lucas and a few older customers, were almost as powerful as the food itself. Later that day, when David thanked him for sticking it out, Lucas knew that Rosy's was once again the kind of place where second chances and fresh starts were real. At closing time, just as Lucas was wiping down the last of the tables and getting ready to lock up, he noticed an envelope tucked beside the old cash register. The handwriting on the front was familiar, and when he opened it, he realized it was from Mr. Harris, a regular who had been coming since Rosy first opened the doors. Inside, the note was simple but sincere. Mr. Harris thanked Lucas and the team for bringing back the heart and warmth to Rosy's diner, for making it the kind of place where strangers leave as friends and old-timers always feel at home. The words hit Lucas in a way he hadn't expected, a quiet proof that everything they had worked for mattered. Lucas slipped the letter into his pocket, tucking it away as a quiet reminder of why he stuck it out through the hard days. He knew keeping Rosy's spirit alive took more than just keeping the doors open. It needed everyday attention, respect for everyone who came through, and the grace to let people grow and try again. Before turning off the lights, Lucas glanced up at the old neon sign. It still buzzed and flickered, never quite shining perfectly. But tonight he smiled, knowing that Rosy's was truly alive again, and that tending this little corner of the world would always be worth it.